The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
This week's show will cover the historic election from this past Tuesday. An election which saw President Donald Trump win a historic landslide victory in both the Electoral College and popular national vote. Trump received more votes in Pennsylvania than any Republican candidate for president in history. And his margin of victory was the largest since Ronald Reagan wiped out Walter F. Mondale in 1984. To discuss the result, we have two special guests. Senior Vice President of Mercury Strategies, Vince Galko, and four-term United States Congressman Dan Meuser, who, by the way, was just reelected with over 70% of the vote in his congressional district. We look forward to breaking down the result in the nation and Pennsylvania and what it means for the country moving forward.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Welcome to the Volpe Report. As you heard in the open for the show, we're very pleased to have two special guests. Longtime Republican strategist, and you heard his credentials and resume, Vince Galko with Mercury Consulting. And to my right here, good friend, now four-time United States Congressman, R9, 9th Congressional District, Dan Meuser, who, by the way, I'll start with you, Dan, in this historic day for not only Pennsylvania, for the future of America. You won with 70% of the vote. Congratulations.
Thanks. It really is a historic day, huh? I never thought November 6th would be here, and boy, oh boy, did we have a great night.
Yeah.
Great day, a great campaign, just a lot of strength, a lot of momentum.
Yeah.
The so-called groundswell came through, and on the statewide candidates, the congressional picking up two, and here in the eastern part of the state, and U.S. Senate, which we certainly believe Dave McCormick's going to wrap up shortly. Yeah. And of course, we got the presidency. So looking forward to a golden age, as President Trump put it, the next 4 years.
No doubt. And it right now, when I left my home to come here, they had it at 52-48 Republican Senate, which they checked off. The Republicans had the majority. But that's without Dave McCormick, who the last time with only a 1 or 2% left to count, he has like a 56,000 vote lead. Yeah. So, and I'll turn to you, Vince. Let's start right in with Dave McCormick, beating a three-term, not just any three-term incumbent, but Robert P. Casey Jr. The Casey name has been on ballots since I was a little boy. Of course, his famous father, an Auditor General of Pennsylvania, multi-term. Then, of course, in 1986, became the governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And, so then in his own right, Bob Jr., who is a friend of mine personally, we disagree on a lot of political issues, but then he goes on to become an Auditor General following in his father's footsteps, and then ultimately becomes a United States Senator and then gets reelected 2 more times. So he serves 18 years in the United States Senate. So that's like a tree falling, like with a thud, if in fact that is what happens. The projection is that Dave McCormick will be declared the winner. But your thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, Dave McCormick, tremendous candidate. A couple of reasons why I believe he won. Number one, he's just a great candidate. I think when people analyze campaigns all the time, they're like, well, timing and money and resources. It starts with a great candidate. Like Congressman Meuser, great candidate. Dave McCormick, you have to have that strength of a candidate to win, number one. So starting off, he's a great candidate. Number two, ran an unbelievable campaign, slow and steady, didn't panic when things were, those summer days when the lead was stretching and people were having doubts. He never panicked, stuck to his message, had a great organization. One thing I credit McCormick campaign, both Dave and his team with, was they started early. They didn't wait this time around. They did the necessary things to lay the groundwork with the county chairman, the county parties, had the grassroots organization. So on day one, when that campaign launched, they were a fine-tuned machine. Also, I mean, you can't deny the fact that President Trump's showing certainly helped Dave and the entire ticket up and down. The thing we have to take away from this election is that I think progressives and Democrats are going to say this is an outlier, it's a fluke. It is not. It was a mandate.
Historic, look,
Absolutely.
historic landslide. The latest projections are he's expected to win just about every state they haven't called, meaning President Trump, which means Michigan and Nevada and Arizona. And when you get at all that up, he's going to be around, Congressman, he's going to be around 320 or so. That's a 100-point electoral college victory. And he's up, what, 5+ million in the national vote, which is another decisive. When you add all that together, this is a pervasive landslide across every demographic.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Here in Pennsylvania, we hesitate to put it this way, but we largely did everything right. I mean, I said it a few months ago. I felt like we were a 12-cylinder car firing on all cylinders. I mean, our early vote was 500,000 votes better, ballots better than 2020. So we had a strong effort there. Our registration was off the charts prior to that. Our early vote turnout with mail-in ballots as well was was close to where the Democrats were. I mean, last time around they beat us by 1 million, and then throw in there the candidates, from Dave, of course, to President Trump, to our statewides, Stacey Garrity, Dave Sunday, Tim DeFore. Everybody was just rowing in the same direction. We had some great congressional candidates as well. So we just had that groundswell. The Trump Force 47. I mean, we had thousands and thousands of phone calls being made and doors being knocked on by various groups, and then throw in there to protect the vote, right? All the poll workers. So, if there's any thought that there's going to be any shenanigans, how do you possibly miscount and count ballots you shouldn't be counting when we have our own eyes in there, trained eyes? Right. So it was really a template, a model of how to be bulletproof. And it was just very, very hard to beat us.
Right. Well, I had thought that to follow up on Dan's point, I had been telling people that were afraid. Oh, what if there's any shenanigans and all that kind of thing this time? And I said, the thing about if there were shenanigans and there was cheating last time, and look, there's cheating in most elections. The only issue is how much does it become material and a factor. But I said, that's like the old, let's say, the cheater at cards. Any cheat that's going to occur, if there is such a thing, is based on the element of surprise. Once you know a person is going to do it, that old line about fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I thought the Republicans, and I can tell you one instance that I was personally involved in yesterday, and to your point about how well organized the Republicans were, not only in getting out the early mail-in vote, which was huge, the organization to get out the vote, the ground game was huge. But in addition to that, for example, my sister Bonnie was a poll watcher up in Pike County, Palmyra Township. Now, that's one of the counties that, even though Pike is generally Republican, but Palmyra is overwhelmingly blue because, a lot of, remember, New York and New Jersey folks came and settled in all those counties, Monroe County, Pike County, when COVID hit. So she said when she walked in, they gave her a hard time. She had to show ID to vote, and there was some hassle there. But she was also, they had to certify her. Dan, you would know about this. She went through a whole program of certification, and once she was approved by the Trump campaign, they sent certificates to the polling places so that you would be allowed in to be a poll watcher. Yeah. Well, the certificates didn't show up. Her certificate wasn't there. So, but here, to your point, so I make a call to, I know you know him very well, and I know you do as well. So I make a call to Kurt Cocadrilli, who is at Mar-a-Lago with President Trump. He gets on the phone. Chuck, how you doing? He's actually going to have lunch with his son down at Mar-a-Lago. I said, sorry to bother you. You got a lot of other plans, but, everybody has to deal with what's in front of them. I said, my sister, Kurt, Bonnie, was a certified poll watcher, and they kicked her out of the polling place, and she had no certificate that was supposed to be there. Well, he said, Chuck, I can't believe it, but thanks for calling. We're on it. He said, he made 3 or 4 phone calls. He calls back 20 minutes later. He talked to the RNC in Washington. Yeah. He talked to the head of the campaign in Pennsylvania, and within an hour, they had a certificate that showed up. So, that's pretty amazing.
And I'll also say, I've never seen a presidential. I worked McCain's, Romney's, Bush prior to that, Trump 2016. there's never, in 2020, I guess as well, I don't think there's ever been a responsiveness from a presidential team like we had this time, as well as the relationship with the PAGOP. I mean, you had the RNC, Mike Whatley, Lara Trump, and our PAGOP working as one.
Right, no doubt. One of the things, and I'll turn to you, Vince, as the political historian here, because God knows from co-chairing George W. Bush's Pennsylvania campaign back, 2004 was that?
Yes.
All the other things you've done. You've been in Santorum's campaign, in a leading capacity when he won for U.S. Senate. Of course, you were one of the gurus behind Lou Barletta's rise when he beat Kanjorski. So you've been around this block a long time. But here's a number for you that was Trump won Pennsylvania yesterday by the largest margin of any Republican presidential candidate in history. One. And in the same vein, the last time a Republican president won Pennsylvania by the large margin he did was Ronald Reagan in 1984 when he annihilated Walter Mondale.
And I would say very similar circumstances of both campaigns, right? I think what the left continually does, the leftist media, the progressives, is they focus on the messenger and President Trump. They don't focus on the message. And the message was getting throughout. President Trump is a very, stays on message. He gets credit for that, but it gets criticized that he doesn't. But he actually does if you follow him. There's a method to his madness. And he's very good about staying on message over and over again. And his message was three things: the economy, immigration, world affairs. It's insecurity around the world. And he stayed on those three messages throughout. And that's what led him to such wide margins in the state, is that the economy and security, people want to be able to walk their kids to the park. They want to be able to go fill their gas tank, take their kids on vacation. It doesn't matter what your race is. It doesn't matter whether you live on the main line or you live out in Forest County. These same issues face people all the time. And President Trump spoke to those issues, and that's why he was able to bring those margins down, whether it was Northeast Philadelphia or Westmoreland County. These same issues affect people regardless of their creed or their race or their geography.
Exactly, and that's why the Latino voters, Latino Pennsylvanians, Latino Americans, improved with Trump by like 20%
Ridiculous.
Versus Biden. I mean,
perfect
a huge
example. You mentioned Lou Barletta.
African American males.
Yeah.
20%.
Yeah.
Lou Barletta was saying this, 25 years ago when he was mayor of Hazleton, that illegal immigration hurts legal immigrants the most.
Right.
And the left has never understood that, because they're the ones that are competing for the jobs and the crowded schools and everything else. So I am not shocked at all that President Trump did so well with the Latino community, because they are affected the most by illegal immigration.
A lot of moderate independents and Democrats in 2019 into 2020 in that race kind of had the luxury. See, when there's such peace and prosperity, you have a luxury to look at fringe issues. You look at, there's some chaos in the Trump White House, and he's on Twitter a lot, and I don't particularly like some of the things he said. And you look at other issues that were kind of ancillary issues, because in peace and prosperity, I hate to say fat, dumb, and happy, we're all that, but you had a 3.25% mortgage rate on a 25-year home mortgage. We had record-breaking new home purchases because of the low interest rates. We had the highest relative versus inflation wage growth, so that there was a huge positive gap in what the wages were versus what inflation was back then. And there was, again, peace and prosperity. Things were good. We had the best economy, the lowest inflation, the lowest interest rates in a 50-year period. Yeah. And people had the luxury to say, maybe we'll we're going to, there's a lot of chaos, and we'll vote for Joe Biden because he's the safe choice and he'll calm the things down. Yeah, right. Well, guess what? What I had said going into this one was that those things are all gone now. Right. So people that didn't see that, to me, I saw this wave coming because people now are losing their homes. They can't afford. 2/3 of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. They're paying for regular bills on credit cards where they're being charged 25 or 30%. They're heading towards bankruptcy. And we're invaded. In our neighborhoods, we have Venezuelan gangs overtaking housing complexes. Right. I mean, how could you be that tone deaf?
Right, tone deaf is the right term. I mean, look at the rallies, right, and the message that we have at the rallies. Everything you're talking about. I mean, we had a woman there, Patty Moran, whose daughter tragically was murdered. And I talked to her for 10, 15 minutes before the rally began. Murdered, right? She's up there giving this tearful plea for border security, and meanwhile they got Beyonce and Ricky Martin and
George
Oprah.
Clooney and Oprah
you know,
yeah.
I mean, like, juxtapose that. I mean, that, you know, people they don't care about that. They care about how much their grocery bill is.
And don't forget other things. As we're on this subject, they had to worry about their grade school children being indoctrinated with discredited theories on critical race theory. They had to worry about bathroom security in grade school, that you would have boys in girls' bathrooms. Tampon Tim right, was the vice president.
That guy was a gift that never stopped giving. Right?
Like, they had to worry about daughters, had to worry about competing against males in sport. I mean, pick something.
Throw in there Mark Cuban's, his comments on women, that we're weak, they're unintelligent.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, we had more women at the last couple of rallies than we ever had before.
Yeah, that's right.
He motivated them.
I think that, you know, their definition of the middle class and what President Trump's definition of middle class are two different things. You know, middle class for President Trump and Republicans has always been the heart and soul of this country. People are struggling for the American dream. You know, and more you get the impression that the left and Hollywood, the middle class is just the people that are there to do what we tell them to do and vote the way we tell them to vote.
Yeah. That's exactly right. You know, all along, my critique of any involvement they had is they are so insulated from what's really going on in America. Again, like, geez, know what you don't know. Shut up and live in your $50 million mansion and go act. That's what you do, act, and you're good at that. But quit telling people how to live their lives. Yeah. And that's part of what I thought the Democrats' ultimate failure was. It's this scolding type of mentality that we're going to determine what you can and can't do, you know, as we see it. And the people said, no. This country was founded on the principles of inalienable rights from our Creator, God. He still does exist, by the way. And the government's job is to protect those rights, not tell you what rights you can have. The offense people had told me they took by that was a big issue in this race.
The more they revealed themselves, the worse off they were. And the more we revealed ourselves, that people became informed, like J.D. Vance, right? The more people got to know him, the more said, hey, I really like him, you know? And you have... you have Kamala, talking about, somebody says Jesus is Lord, and she yells out, "You're immediately." It was the first time she was responsible off the top of her head. Says, "You must be at the wrong rally."
Yeah, get out, pretty much.
Just a reflex reaction for it. Right?
Yeah. And then we got Elon Musk, and again, they got Oprah, scolding people, saying he's trying to shame them into whatever it is that they are trying to do. So, yeah, they were just misfiring. They were out of tune.
Someday, when the history of this generation and this time is written, I think Elon Musk, I think before President Trump ends his term in office, he's going to drape that Medal of Freedom around Elon Musk's neck. And I want to specifically get your take on him. To me, he goes down in the book of all-time American heroes and patriots, because part of this victory was the result, because Democrats had such a complete lock on what news and information people got. Him spending $44 billion to buy Twitter and turn it into X became a forum for people, not disinformation, but to really tell people how evil and bad the progressive radicals were that had hijacked my old party. And when more and more people understood what those positions were, I think Elon Musk he gets a major assist in this.
I mean, Musk's story is amazing. I mean, I hope people got to know him or a little bit more about him before he got into this politics in recent times, because his story, from his humble beginnings and what his family had to go through and to what he built himself up to be, I often think there's got to be more than one of them. How does one person run all these companies and do all this? I think he's cloned. It's amazing what he accomplished. But you're right. I mean, I think when history is written on Musk, and they're going to look more at what he's accomplished in science and in business than they are in politics, but it's going to be quite a history to be written.
Right.
Yeah, I asked him if I could be on the efficiency commission. I also asked him if he could clone me.
Well, now let's turn to really, we're talking about the supporting actors in this great drama, and you're one. What you did for him in Pennsylvania and around the country, as I've said in past shows, I know because of our friendship, the role you played, going to rallies and the things you did to help. But in addition to that, let me now and get your comments on this. Let's go back to, if this story is like Hamlet, well, Donald J. Trump was Hamlet in Hamlet. He was the main actor. And First of all, he made history last night. Here's a fact for our audience, a free political historical fact. The only time a president, an incumbent president that lost the presidency and then managed to succeed himself was Grover Cleveland in 1892. The only time it's in the history of this country. So what he did last night was it's been 100 years since that happened, over 100 years. But at any rate, so there's that point. But what he endured, the onslaught, the ridicule, the calls of the January 6th, as you were called a seditionist, and everybody that supported him were called traitors. He endured all those slings and arrows, and nonetheless said, "I'm going to run for re-election," which most people, including me, didn't think were possible back then. And then, okay, well, that wasn't enough to stop it. So then they hit him with every sort of lawfare. They tried to bankrupt his business with the most ridiculous civil case in the history of this country, Letitia James, the radical Democratic Attorney General of New York. Then they hit him with 38 or 40-some counts of criminal indictments on the most nonsensical thing. They were effectively a summary federal campaign finance issue. They turned it into felonies, which will go down as one of the most catastrophes and it's a shame as a member of the legal profession and a lawyer. So, and they convict him on all those counts. And then we go further and then
the fines, raiding his house.
Right. Oh, and then blew off his ear. And, there were 3 roofs in all of Butler County, and our Secret Service happened to leave the one with a direct shot. Yeah. So
those slanted roofs are trouble.
Oh yeah, those OSHA standards. We can't have our SWAT guys up on those roofs. So to overcome all of that, he will go down, and rightly so, is one of the great presidents in really figures, transversing from the 20th century into the 21st century. The resilience. The only person I would say, honestly, is that had persistence. I used to have in my office, and they had a picture of Abraham Lincoln, and they talked about how he ran for this office and lost. Then he ran for that office and lost. Then he won one. Then he ran for this office and lost. And then he ran for that office. And finally worked his way all the way up to U.S. Senate against Douglas and lost. And then it ended with, and then became arguably the greatest president in the history of the United States. And the point was persistence. Well, I think those same attributes, if you look at what he's been through, will someday be applied to Donald Trump.
And I was at Butler both times, but on July 13th, and literally when he got hit, Dave McCormick and I were right next to each other.
You had bullets over your head that day.
Right over our heads. Dave missed being on stage by a fluke. Right. Trump called him up, and he says, wait a minute. Within a minute, the bullets were firing. And when we saw him get hit, Dave and I both saw him. He went down. I mean, he went down deliberately. But when he came up, we weren't sure if he was hit a couple more times. I mean, when he came up and did the fight, blood coming down his face, I'm thinking he has a couple more bullet holes in his body. I'm thinking those could be his last words. Right? And instead, it turns into this iconic scene of a man's fortitude and character, leadership.
Yeah, I thought, honestly, that if you have to look at, there are a lot of events on why he won the election, but that may stand alone as the one. And one of the things that bothered me is and I like your take on Vince, talk about taking the truth and turning it into a complete lie. They have pitched, meaning the radical National Democrats, pitched this idea that Trump and the Republicans and the MAGA were a threat to democracy. Mm-hmm. The threat to democracy is them. They're the ones trying to censor people. They're the ones trying to order all these mandates, from masks to vaccines. They're the ones that are kicking Robert F. Kennedy Jr. off ballots. They're the ones using lawsuits and lawfare to get rid of like we're a banana republic. And then they sit there and say he's a threat to democracy.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, they worried about President Trump's retributions. Well, I think President Trump's staff are the only ones that have been indicted and imprisoned over the course of the last 4 years. I don't think any of Biden or Harris's people were. So it's such a hypocrisy. But also, again, going back to what the congressman said, just the tone deafness of it. People were suffering in this country financially, security-wise, just not feeling good about themselves. And this is what they focused on every day. How do we talk about Trump more, negative. And I think the biggest thing was that, the progressives left in the media focus on, how are we going to divide today? Divide and conquer.
That's their strategy.
And it,
and lie.
It completely backfired on them this time around because people were looking for a unifying message. And, when it comes to polling, I always say that it's more important how people feel on a poll than what they're saying on the ballot. And consistently for the last 6 months, that right track, wrong track number was, 60, 65, 70%. And you cannot win an election with that. And Harris, she tried her best to turn the page, not be the incumbent. But how do you not be the incumbent when you're vice president for 3.5 years?
Well,
and it was very difficult to overcome that.
Well, Vince, you can't do it by not answering a question when they ask you that question. I know you can't do it by, I grew up in a middle class with a white picket fence.
How many times did we hear that?
Look,
Gave a punchline to a joke.
The first question in the first debate that she was in was, are Americans better off than they were 4 years ago? Yeah. Well, I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood. I worked at McDonald's. Yeah. Lie, which she didn't do. Like, you can't make it up. Back to you, Dan. Now, I'd like to, because we're winding down in time, and I'm going to make you part of this. You've become one of my most regular guests, beside one of my close friends. But beyond that, I'll take some credit for both of us in that you're going to be in you're going to be in the majority in the House, thank God, the Republicans are. But it's going to only be a couple votes, right? And we could probably look to this media market right here, 2 seats flipped, right?
Yeah.
Matt Cartwright and Susan Wild, Democrats, lost.
Yep.
And I said to take some credit. We have been hitting it pretty hard, the issues that were the Trump campaign, the Republicans' campaigns for 4 years, you and I, right? I mean, on this show, you had that wonderful line.
You certainly have.
You had that wonderful line, wake up and woke down, which I said should have been a bumper sticker.
Yeah.
So they say that, if you're doing your job in public broadcasting, it's to change hearts and minds and tell people the truth. I think that we played a role in this media market on what happened.
No doubt.
I agree. You articulate the truth. I mean, you give us the time too to explain, to go through, to dissect, and to show people why we're supporting a particular issue and what the results will be of that issue. And then we contrast it to the direction they're going, and we win on the policy discussion. So there's no doubt. Shows like this are really important.
Well, thanks for making this show what it is, Vince.
Great to be here.
Pleasure. And Congressman, congratulations again.
Thanks.
And Godspeed in the work that lies ahead of you. Yep. You guys have a hell of a reclamation project ahead of you for America.
We do.
And no one I trust will get to it more than you guys.
There's going to be a sense of urgency. There's going to be leadership. Trump and Johnson have a good relationship, and so maybe that will strengthen Johnson a little bit more. I mean,
he called him out on stage last night in his victory speech. He made sure he acknowledged the speaker, which is, to me, his endorsement, because we all know his endorsement dictates the leadership, and it should.
It should. Absolutely.
Well, at any rate, thank you for joining in today. We'll pick up next week with a new guest, and now our attention is going to turn to the future of Pennsylvania as a result of this election and this country and the transition that will occur in Washington. I hope you'll join us. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Lieutenant Colonel Joe Albert, Commander of American Legion Post 121 in Scranton, inviting you all tomorrow to come to our annual Veterans Day program in honor of the men and women who served in uniform and served their country. After the election, which I hope you all voted in, it's time to recognize those who preserve freedom and do it for all of us. Our program tomorrow will be at the Lackawanna County Courthouse on Washington Avenue, promptly beginning at 11 a.m. The 11th hour of the 11th day is the day the Great War ended. So I hope you will all come and enjoy a very happy Veterans Day. And of course, our thanks to Fox and Chuck Volpe for giving us this time.